7. Today is Friday, January the 23rd, 2015, and today's webinar is Uncle Pete and Cowboy Andy Doubleheader. It's all yours, Uncle Pete.
All right, so let me see if I can take over the screen here. I believe.
Yep, we see your screen.
Yeah, the key is you're seeing the right one. I believe you are. You're seeing WebDev, right?
Yes, water systems.
Perfect. All right, so Andy and I are going to show you a couple of different things in loopers today. What I'm showing you is the issue of changing the looper background as your mouse moves from row to row in the looper. Basically the same way that you would expect it to work, and it does work in WINDEV, of a table row or a looper. As you move your mouse, the highlight bar shows you what row your mouse is over. Unfortunately, that for whatever reason is not done in WebDev, so I had to figure out a way to do it myself. So it turned out to be just a few lines of code. I actually battled with it for a couple of days on a project, gave up. Andy needed it for one of his projects and tried several different things and kept telling me what he was trying, and finally
fussing and moaning.
Finally I said, well, he's not going to give up. I'm going to have to figure out how to do this. So I took another shot at it, and that's kind of what I'm going to show you today. The 5 lines of code is great and wonderful, and it'll definitely help you, but far more important is to see how I went about figuring out how to do it, because the same concept is the concept you use to figure out how to do any advanced CSS, JavaScript, jQuery type things that you're trying to do with WebDev. Once you get outside the box, this is kind of how you need to get outside the box without falling off the edge of the world or something. So let's look at what I did first, and we'll start with where I got the design from. I was working on integrating Stripe, which is a payment processor, and while working on it, I noticed that their frequently asked questions site just had a really nice clean interface, and I was needing a frequently asked questions section for a site I'm building for Alan. So I liberated, you can't see the air quotes, but they're there, I liberated this design for our site. The only issue is you'll see that as you move the mouse, it's very light. I'm not sure if that's showing up well on.
It's not.
Okay, it's very light, but the rows are slightly highlighted as you're moving from row to row. And you'll also notice that the mouse cursor is a pointer, both indicating to you that you can click to get more details. So that was the look and feel that I was trying to replicate. And this is what I wound up with in WebDev. Out of the box, I could get this far. Notice the mouse cursor isn't showing a pointer. It's showing just a normal mouse cursor instead of the hand. And I'm not getting any row highlighting. The actual interface works. You can click and get the details, but unfortunately, there's just no indication to the user that there's a click event available, which is what that highlighting of the row and the different mouse cursor does, is let the user know that there's an event there for them to use. It's all about that user-friendly interface. So anyway, that was the problem. You just don't have that feature. So I started working on this, and if we look at the looper, the crazy thing is, if we come into looper and we look at the style, you have even rows and odd rows. And if we go into the more options, got to check out the style before to let me get in there. If we look at more options, there's actually an over here where I can configure that color. So I could configure the background color to a different color for over. The only issue is that WebDev's actually not using these settings. So no matter what you put in this over, it doesn't get to your site. For whatever reason, PCSoft has just not implemented it. I sent a question to support asking them about it, and they said that, no, it's not supported, that they would, suggest it to development. So maybe it'll be, a feature of version 21 or something, or be real nice for it to sneak into 20. But anyway, so there's not a way in standard WebDev to get that background to change. And so then the next thing is, okay, we need to do it by CSS code or jQuery or JavaScript, one of the HTML tools that are available to us. So I tried a few things, like I said, couldn't get it to work. Andy tried a few things, just couldn't quite get there. The actual CSS code, all you're doing is changing a background. It's just where in your HTML code to attach that. So, and that's the real key to this whole thing. So again, I use Google Chrome, and it has the inspect element as part of the developer tools. If you're using Firefox, Firebug's very similar. I'm not sure what IE uses. So if we take a look at this looper and see how WebDev builds it, you'll notice as I'm moving, it's actually highlighting. As I move through the code, it highlights what is being selected here. So if I crunch this down, we'll see that what WebDev does, because remember, there is no such thing as an actual looper in HTML code. HTML code is all just simple tables and text and that sort of thing. So what it's doing is when WebDev generates our looper, it's generating a table with rows for each row of our looper. Like this looper has 3 rows. You see here, we have a table that is our looper, and it has rows 1, 2, and 3. And then if we look at one of those rows, we'll see that there's actually, within that row, there's a cell, and then within that cell, there's a div, and then within that div, there's a table. You just come up with this nested upon nested upon nested. But the key for me, for CSS code, you need to be able to attach it to something. I don't want to affect every table row on the entire page, because obviously there's a bunch of table rows for other stuff that I don't want when your mouse moves over to be changing the background. And this table row here doesn't have any class ID or anything like that I can attach to. So I have no way to get my code to attach to this table row. And because of the way WebDev generates the looper code, I've got no way from WebDev to get anything else on this line of code. But if you notice, this div section right here is That's a div section that is surrounding one entire row, and it does have an ID. It has a CSS ID that's loop frac, which is, if we look at the code, is the name of my looper, _1. Now, if we look at the next one, the next row, we see that it's loop _2. So now I know in HTML that's getting generated from my looper, every row of my looper is the name of the looper _ row number, 1, 2, 3, 4, on down the line. Now, an important thing to remember, anytime you're dealing with HTML, JavaScript, CSS code, those sort of things, you need to come into the either do it at the project level or at the page level. And I'm trying to find where it is. I always forget where. Right here. And you need to turn off the compressing of the JavaScript code. If you, by default, both of these are checked. If compress the JavaScript code is checked, it's not going to use loop fac. It's going to use A4 _ or some crazy thing like that. So it's going to be harder for you to write your custom CSS or JavaScript code because you're not going to have the actual names of controls that you've used in your coding. So by turning that off, it generates all that HTML and CSS code using the names of the controls that I use. And we see that my looper name is loop FAQ. So now, now I know that every row of my looper will be loop FAQ _1, 2, 3, 4. So now all I need to do is attach CSS code to that ID. So now let's go look at the CSS code. And what I did was on the page in the Advanced tab, and I don't think I can blow that up. Let me pull this over in the notepad because I'm sure that's hard to see. How's that?
Much better.
All right, so all I'm doing is...
Does the capitalization have anything to do with it?
In here it does. The rest of it doesn't. All I'm doing is sticking, this is just, if we look where this code is, it's in the HTML code before the page header.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I stress that even though WebDev does a lot for you, you need to understand a little basics of HTML and CSS and JavaScript, because that's all WebDev uses on the browser side. So you've got to understand this code enough to be able to expand it like we're doing here. So all I'm doing is sticking an extra style section into the HTML page that gets generated. And what I'm saying here is every div section, and then this is what's called the CSS selector. So I'm saying every div section whose ID starts with, that's what the == is starts with loop FAQ _. So every div section that starts with loop FAQ _ apply this CSS to it. And what the CSS I'm applying is on hover, change the background color to E2, 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 and change the cursor to the pointer, which is the finger, indicating that there's a click. So that is all I did, was put this code right here. And now when we run the page, As we hover over a row, we now see that the background changes. And we also have the cursor looks like a hand indicating a click. So now it's much more obvious to the user that there's further action that can be taken place on these rows. So this was, again, I spent a couple of days trying different things and gave up. What I wound up doing was just turning that subject line into a HTML link, and it's just not as attractive that way. But I needed to move on to other pieces of the project, so I gave up. Andy, you know, I know you spent 2 or 3 days trying different things.
Yeah, I was working on trying to get a cell to highlight, and the cell would work out nicely as long as it wasn't part of the looper, and all kinds of things I was trying to get doing with cells and stuff, try to get it to work with cells. And I kind of give the indication there when Pete was talking about it, it kind of gave him the indication of what he thought he could do, because what I was doing with the cells pointed him in a different direction, and I'm glad I could just aggravate him long enough to do it, but that's just me.
Yeah. So you know, again, at the end of the day, once I found a spot in that HTML code that WINDEV generates that I could use to attach my CSS code, the actual code is very simple. You know, the CSS code, if you've done any HTML work at all, that little bit of CSS code is pretty simple CSS code. The only advanced part of that is the selector piece. Other than that, that's straight basic CSS code. The real key to all this is figuring out where to attach your code, how to get it to only affect what you want it to affect. And that's where using the Google Chrome development tools or Firebug or something like that is very important.
One of the other key things that, well, in addition to this, I know we're just talking about just highlighting on a looper, but one of the key things that the little insight of turning off the JavaScript, the compact portion of the JavaScript or the compact portion of the HTML, what that does is it now gives you the correct names and stuff throughout your entire HTML and JavaScript of what you need to look for. That opens the door for a lot more CSS or JavaScript or different functions that's outside of WINDEV to be able to use it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're already exploring some other things in American Litho of attaching things, because we now can find the name of whatever the element is, where we hadn't seen it before because we just didn't know about the
right. Yeah, because otherwise all your controls are named A4, A5. Yeah. And then that looper code really gets nasty because it'll be like A4 underscore A2 underscore.
Yeah.
You know, so there's just no way you would know what's being generated and where to attach your code. So
yeah, it gets
definitely.
We're gonna have some fun with it now, especially in working with things, being able to utilize the names. Now, some people think that it's going to run slower and stuff like this. You do have to take that in consideration since it's not compacted. If you run an external site with a bunch of users, then you might want to you can use it sparingly, because it may slow down your user experience.
Yeah, the only time I think that would be the case would be, you know, slow connections, you know, because as far as your server, I don't think it's going to slow your server down at all. It's just the amount of text going over the connection,
and that's it. That's it.
It's the amount of text. You know, unless you're in, you know, South Africa or somewhere like that they're still struggling with connection speeds.
South Africa?
I just don't think
that's true.
An issue.
Yeah. Where's Ben? Ben's still waiting for it to get here.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, like Andy was saying, you know, this site, I'll show you really quickly. There's not a lot of fancy stuff on here, but I've peppered in just enough jQuery and CSS to give the site some nice extra features that you can't do with out-of-the-box WebDev without getting crazy. In other words, I'm still getting full benefit of WebDev development. Yeah, this entire site is in regular WebDev. There's no crazy to do something. I have to do a lot of crazy text files or anything like that. I've just peppered in a little jQuery here and there. For instance, combo boxes with multi-lines for the selector so that I can show the addresses under these account IDs when they're selecting an account. This slider bar that lets you choose the date of the transactions you're looking at. And then if we go to account settings, you'll see that I have checkboxes that have nice yes/no slider buttons instead of normal checkboxes. So not off the wall, completely. There's jQueries out there that you can do an entire spreadsheet control. But as soon as you try to use one of those, now you're basically giving your entire interface over to jQuery, and you're going to be hand coding everything you do in WebDev. If you got to, you got to. But I try to avoid that. I try to just pepper in a little jQuery and CSS here and there to make it a little nicer, but still stay inside the WebDev box as much as possible. And Andy's about to show you how to get some of that spreadsheet feel out of a standard.
Yes, I am. It's going to be pretty neat.
But yeah, all of this would not be possible if I didn't have that compact jQuery turned off. Now, the one caveat I will warn you about, I've ran into it 2 or 3 times. You can create a screen control name or a button name or something like that that happens to be a JavaScript reserve word or is an invalid variable name for JavaScript for some reason.
Don't do that.
If you do, it breaks all your JavaScript code.
You'll know it though.
Nothing works. Yeah, so that's just something to be aware of. If you run your page and clicking on buttons and stuff just doesn't work, more than likely you've broken JavaScript. And again, the developer tools are going to help you see where that area is.
Sure.
So that's my half of this. So now you can see the rows as you're hovering your mouse over them. Now Andy's going to show you the next step in making your loopers.
As soon as I find the correct screen to share, there we go. Okay, you should be looking at it now.
One second. Hey, Pete, we have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, the question is from Jeff Graham. What causes the flashing of the login page, or is that just caused by the Google+?
Must be caused by the Google+.
Okay, thanks, Pete.
Okay. Should be looking at a looper. Now, this is just about as simple as
ever.
Isn't it gorgeous? I put it together this morning in like 15 minutes. Okay, and this is only to show that you can literally click in these things and use the up and down arrow keys to go to each field and maneuver around as you wish from each one of them. Okay? Now, the reason why we do this is because at American Litho, we've got quite a few things that we have to deal with. And one of them is that we really stretch the limits of what WebDev dynamic does. So we use pagers and things like this, but one of the things that they'd really like to be able to do is go up and down the row of the looper and be able to edit pieces of the looper without having to go to the end of the looper, then to the next line, things like this, going using the tabbing portion of this. When we were working on this, Don was playing with it also. We had some JScript, and let me get the deal up here. Where we were looking at event keys. In looking at the different event keys, we discovered that all we had to do was get the proper key, and we could actually tell it which field to go to. Now, some of the key parts about this is that when you build your looper navigation, or when you build your looper, you obviously put fields on your looper as you go across. Those we don't work with, okay, except to put the code in. Your description of the looper, we have all the attributes of each one of them. Each one of the attributes where we've got the field and the value, everything is set. The only difference between this and everybody else's is the fact these are not Ajax loopers. These are classic loopers. They're not Ajax. Make sure that's turned to classic in order to make this work, and it will work. Once you've got this all set up like you're supposed to, then the only thing is in each one of the fields, you go into the code, you take on the key down, and you get the JS info event of the key code going through there, and you're checking for a 13, a 40, and a 38. And what that does then is we're setting the focus to the field either above or below by using the index value of whatever current row we're on. Okay? So whatever current row we are on is we're going up or down based upon whatever key was pressed, either up arrow or down arrow. So literally what happens is we get the up-down. Works like a charm. Now what you do is you put that on every field, okay? Every field requires it. So on each one of the fields, what I do is I copy that to each one of the fields and change the ATT field name for whatever it needs to be. And that's all you do. Each one of them, 1, 2, and 3. You could probably add in the right arrow or something like that, but you got to remember if you do the right arrow on this, then you're also messing up your field. So you might want to think about that. I still use the tab to go between the fields, but the up-down arrow allows them to go up and down straight forward, and just put that on each field. I'm going to package this up. This is a little application that I just threw together. It's ugly as sin, and that's adamant. But it does show you how to go up and down and treat this more like a spreadsheet. Now you still have to use tab to go through here, but I can go up and down the rows as I wish and change different things. Excuse me, as I need to do it. Works like a charm. Any questions? That's it. I mean, that's just as fast and furious as it is. There's nothing special I have to do with CSS, nothing special around the block. Very straightforward.
Okay, I don't see any questions out here on the board anywhere, and I see that Jerome has joined us. Let me see if he wants to say anything. Just one
Hello,
more.
Jerome.
Let me go ahead and give him permissions. Hello, Jerome. You can speak if you need to, or present, whatever you need to do.
I think he's over here looking at her code, Pete.
Well, I hope. Unfortunately, he got here after mine. I'm sure.
Yeah,
sure we should go back there and say, "Hey guys, all we need to do is take this CSS code and
That's right.
apply it to the style sheet settings that are already there.
Pete, you know, he was really looking at mine as more important, you know.
But I guarantee it'll be one of the features 921.
That's right. 934.2.
Hey, as long as I get a nickel every time feature 921 is used, I'll be okay.
Okay, well there are no questions on the board. Anybody else have anything? Glenn? Jerome?
I'll do a backup of this. I'll do a backup of this and send it up so everybody can have an example online. I'll send it up there and attach it to the program deal so we can have a backup of it. Anybody wants to play with it, see how it works, they can have it.
Okay. Well, with no questions, the last word is yours, Andy.